Now, this is going to be part 2 of my deep dive into the rise of Skywalker, and this time we'll be discussing everything from the balance of the Force, to the prophecy of the Chosen One, to Anakin Skywalker, Force ghosts, and so on. And if you haven't seen the movie yet, and you don't want anything ruined, it's a really good time to click away, because major spoilers are just a couple seconds away. Oh, and if you don't like when things are overly analyzed or nitpicked, this video might not be for you either. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the one thing this movie gets absolutely, unequivocally correct, and that is balance. Because at the end of the film, the Force is in balance. So much so that not only are all living Sith gone, assuming Palpatine was truly alive here, but it's also implied all Sith of the past have been destroyed as well. I'll talk more about that in just a bit. And yes, as discussed many times before in other videos, and to very briefly cover it again here, balance in Star Wars, or within the Force, is not equal parts dark to light. You can't think of it as a scale, rather think of it as harmony or a system working as intended. And thus, balance is the absence of those using the dark side and causing corruption within the Force, not to be confused with the absence of the dark side itself. And no, Jedi existing without any Sith around does not cause imbalance, since a Jedi should only seek to serve the Force and only wants to see the Force remain in balance. A very simple way to think of it is that we wouldn't consider society balanced if we had an equal number of criminals and police, nor would it cause any issues to only have police and no criminals, assuming of course we had no crooked cops or anything like that. And I think we'd all agree that's the desired state to be in. That there be no criminals, but that there be a police force in place should any return. And that's basically how Episode 9 ends. All the Sith are gone, and we have one lone Jedi remaining who will, we can assume, rebuild the Jedi Order to protect the galaxy from any future threats. Problem is, that's almost exactly how the saga once ended with Return of the Jedi. And I say almost only because in The Rise of Skywalker it's implied all of the Sith ever have been destroyed by all of the Jedi ever. Which, on the surface, might sound interesting and a more definitive way to end everything or to wrap it all up permanently, but it makes little sense when we take into account everything else we know from the lore. Because first of all, one of the things that drives Sith is the fear that there is nothing after death, which they're kind of right about. Because when someone or something dies in the Star Wars galaxy, they cease to be a part of the living force and become a part of the cosmic force. And when that happens, their consciousness or their individuality is lost. The exception to this rule are Force ghosts, because when they die and join with the cosmic force, they keep their consciousness and can even come back and interact to some extent with the living force, as we've seen in the movies. However, this requires training to achieve, and to purge all fear and attachments, and as far as we know, Qui-Gon Jinn was the first one to learn this, and was only partially successful. He can't fully manifest when he returns to the living force like others ultimately would be able to. He can only speak to them. He then proceeds to train Yoda and Obi-Wan, both of which would be able to fully manifest after death. Anyway, in the Clone Wars animated series, which yes, is very much part of the canon, this ability to retain consciousness after death is considered to be the great gift, and it's alluded to that there is a reason why some Jedi must accomplish this, that there is something for them yet to do. Also in that series, at one point Yoda encounters what first appears to be the ghost or spirit of Darth Bane. But after a brief interaction with him, Yoda simply dismisses him as an illusion, and that he doesn't really exist anymore, and Bane harmlessly fades away. And it's a great scene not just because it officially makes Darth Bane a part of the canon, but because it shows us that even one of the greatest Sith ever is just dead and gone, that the path of the dark side cannot lead to immortality, which is what many of them desperately want. Even Darth Plagueis, who was powerful enough to create life, couldn't save himself from dying. It's that one thing that is always beyond the reach of the self-serving Sith, until apparently Palpatine finally found a way to pull it off. And look, depending on the way it would be handled, I don't necessarily have a problem with Palpatine coming back and finding a way to achieve this, to be the one and only Sith to manage it after thousands and thousands of years, as long as it was done in an unnatural way, which it clearly was, and Palpatine even says as much. That said, I think the previous films absolutely needed to set up his return better, or at least somewhat, and I think they would have done that had it been the game plan all along to bring him back, because I honestly don't think it was, despite what J.J. Abrams claims. In fact, the biggest issue with this trilogy has been a lack of planning and no shared vision between its writers, but let's not get into all that again. Furthermore, I find it a little odd that all of the Sith were with Palpatine when they should all be dead and gone. There should be no reward for devoting yourself to the dark side. No way all of them somehow achieved immortality on any level. The dark side should always seem like a fruitless endeavor in the end. However, the new canon has been alluding to this idea that those who use the dark side leave a lasting stain upon the Force, which does make some degree of sense, since using the dark side causes corruption and has been referred to by George Lucas as a cancer. So if Palpatine has somehow managed to use all of this residual corruption within the Force in order to bring himself back and barely sustain himself in the process, if he's defying and defiling the Force with every last bit of dark side power left over from all of the Sith that have ever come before him, but then he is ultimately defeated by the Force ghosts who have achieved a type of actual immortality by being true servants of the Force, I think that's an ending that could have worked rather well. And that's almost what we got. But again, the movie wanted to imply it was all of the Sith of old against all of the Jedi of old, despite the fact that all of the Jedi who have died before, save the Force ghosts of course, should have happily joined with the cosmic force and become one with it after death. And it really feels like the only reason this is done, to try to make it feel more grandiose, is to up the stakes and to mask the fact that this ending is almost exactly the same as the way Return of the Jedi ended, only Rey kills Palpatine now instead of Anakin. And so that leads us to the question, was Anakin really the Chosen One? Well, when we hear all the voices at the end of the movie, Anakin says, "Bring back the balance, Rey, as I did." We also have what Luke said in The Last Jedi, that there was balance for a time after the death of Sidious. So I guess the answer is, he is kinda still the Chosen One. I mean, he did bring balance for at least some amount of time. But then again, all the Sith were apparently still around in some capacity after the events of Return of the Jedi, or at least they were still corrupting the Force enough to grant serious power to Palpatine. And it was Rey, with all of the strength of the Jedi, who destroyed all of the Sith, or all of that corruption. So it seems to make it either that Rey is the Chosen One, the one who destroyed the Sith and all their corruption within the Force, or all of the Jedi are the Chosen One, which would include Anakin by default. Either way, it's hard to argue that this movie or new trilogy doesn't greatly diminish the role or importance of Anakin Skywalker. In the end, he's literally just one voice in the crowd. Even him becoming a Force ghost seems irrelevant, since plenty of other Jedi who didn't become Force ghosts spoke at the end of the movie. And just a little nitpick about that. If all of the Jedi ever are supposed to be there for the final battle, why do we only hear recent Jedi? Why are we hearing no Jedi from the distant past? I mean, sure, we can identify all the voices, but Rey can't. She doesn't know who Mace Windu or Kanan Jarrus are or what they sound like. It's so silly to only hear voices that we, the audience, would recognize. Not to mention, how intriguing would it be to have heard voices we didn't know, and in time, we could learn who they were. But what am I thinking? That would require actual planning. Okay, getting back to it, Anakin Skywalker does next to nothing in this trilogy, despite the fact that he's a Force ghost and could have come back to someone at some point and done something. And thanks to this new trilogy, we've learned Force ghosts are capable of all sorts of things, so I don't think it would have been a stretch to even have him show up at the final battle. Hell, we've now seen Force ghosts call down lightning, catch lightsabers, lift X-Wings out of the ocean, so at this point, why aren't they the ones fighting Palpatine? Why is Rey being put into this impossible position of, if I strike down Palpatine, he'll possess me, but if I don't kill him, he'll kill me and take over the galaxy? When Yoda can just show up and, lightning bolt him or something. And we all know Palpatine doesn't do well against lightning. And I'm half joking and half being serious here. Is there a reason why the Force Ghost couldn't show up at the final battle? A reason why Anakin couldn't appear before Palpatine, take up a lightsaber, and simply stab him with it? Are we to assume that Force Ghosts cannot fully manifest around one so powerful with the dark side? Which, yes, would make some sense considering what Obi-Wan told Luke in The Empire Strikes Back, that if he chooses to face Vader, he will do it alone, that he cannot interfere. But turns out all of the Jedi of the past kind of interfered in the final battle anyway, so that doesn't make much sense either. I mean, imagine if we just take out that moment when Rey hears all the Jedi of old giving her encouragement, or the handful they selected, and she instead just gets up because of her own gumption and resilience. She refuses to die without putting up one last fight. Then you have Rey blocking Palpatine's lightning with one lightsaber, Leia's lightsaber, and it looks like Rey is seriously struggling and is about to lose her hold and be fried to death. But that's when you hear the voice of Anakin Skywalker say, "We're with you, Rey," and we see he now stands behind her holding his lightsaber, because why not at this point? They can hold lightsabers, and all of the other Force Ghosts are there with him. Rey will look baffled and mutter, "How?" Anakin will answer, or someone else will say, "We can only be here because you are here, Rey. Your strength is our strength." Then, while Rey holds back the lightning, or maybe Palpatine tries to hit Anakin or the others with it, but it just goes right through them, Anakin walks up to Palpatine and stabs him, and after he does this, Anakin fades away, and we learn a moment later from the other Force Ghost that by taking action like this, by killing someone, even if it's Palpatine, Anakin has forsaken being a Force Ghost. He has made the ultimate sacrifice. The other Force Ghosts will then go on to say that they will make sure that Palpatine never again returns, that they will deal with him within the Cosmic Force, but that they too will never return, that their purpose is now fulfilled, but that the Jedi must endure should the dark side ever rise again, so Rey needs to train a new generation of Jedi. The end. Now sure, that's still pretty similar to how Return of the Jedi ended, and we could ask why the Force Ghost didn't just deal with Palpatine back then. You could also say that this diminishes Rey's role and purpose in the whole saga, but that's why I'd include the line from Anakin about her strength being theirs, implying he's only able to do this because of her. Not to mention, Luke didn't actually kill Palpatine in Return of the Jedi either, but no one would argue he didn't have an important role to play in all of it. We'd also know that Palpatine couldn't just come back yet again, which for all we know right now, with the way things ended, he still can. Though yes, I think the movie did try to imply that he is gone for good this time. And so in closing, yes, this trilogy ends with the Force in balance. So at least there's that. At least they didn't mess that up too. At least they didn't try to imply that dark side Kylo Ren and light side Rey would bring about some type of final balance as they rode off into the sunset together. But the real problem is the trilogy did nothing that the previous one didn't do. All it really did was make things even more confusing and to diminish the accomplishments of all who had come before. Sure, Anakin's sacrifice still saved his son Luke. Nothing can take that away. But in the grand scheme of things, he didn't balance the Force for more than a couple of years at best. And in the end, he's no more than a voice in the crowd. While Rey seems to be the one who did what he could not, defeats Palpatine once and for all, and brings a permanent end to the Sith. And I'll talk more about Rey in the next video in this series. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about Anakin's place or lack of place in the sequel trilogy. Does it bother you or doesn't it? Do you still think Anakin was the chosen one, or is it Rey? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.